Hello everybody, welcome back to Valley of the Mist Block of the Month. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And today we have our October Block of the Month. And yeah, it's another one with no name. One of our sisters keeps suggesting new names to us after we get them done, but that's beside the point. Okay, so this is the block, the sample block, and don't forget to go on our website, valleyofthemistquiltguild.com, and get a copy of the printed instructions. That way you have it for reference.
Right.
So, Shelley, what fabrics do we need?
Okay. First, I'll tell you the fabrics. Okay, we have our focus fabric, which is in the beginning, and it's the Western Washington Shop Hop. And you use this if you're doing these for turn-in. If you're not turning them in, you can use whatever you want for your focus fabric. Then there's a coordinating fabric.
Which is a color you find in the focus fabric.
A white and a black.
And like she was saying, just to review, the focus fabric is an annual fabric that we pick to tie all of the block of the months together for that year. Okay, so on this block, before I do too much, I want to mention the basics of this block is we're going to take these pieces, cut them apart, and then sew them back together in a different order, and make 4. So you start with 10 pieces, and you're going to put together 10 pieces again, and they're in 2 stacked rows of 5 and 5. Now, each of these sub-rectangles that we're going to reform, remake, whatever, you have to cut them apart, and however many pieces that you do the same cuts with are what you get to mix up to put back together. Now, I can cut 10 pieces at one time, but not everybody can, and you don't have to. There's 2 options here. One is you can stack them separately, in smaller amounts, cut, and then use one of the pieces from the prior cut like as a guide to where you need to cut the others, and so you can get them all the same. Or you can take, say, half of them and do a cut, and the other half do a different cut. It's just the ones that you cut one way are the ones you can mix up the colors with. So if you're going to do it with 2 different cuts, get a variety of fabrics in there so you have stuff to mix up. And did you say they have to have one of each of the?
I didn't talk about the size or anything yet.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So what do they have to have?
Okay, they need 10 pieces, and one of those has to be the focus, and the other is mixture of the other 3. And they have to be, all of them are cut 3 inches by 8 inches.
Okay, so after you cut them, you're going to take them and stack them, and make sure you stack all the ones that you're cutting together in the same direction. It doesn't matter if they're right sides up or right sides down. They just have to all be the same, okay? And I thought I'd mention this. I mean, those of you that are experienced sewers or quilters know that, if you want things to not move around, if you iron them together, it kind of keeps the stack straight. It helps. So when you have a big stack of fabric, sometimes that's a helpful little hint to, even if they were already flat, you could re-iron them, and after you carefully stack them. Okay, so the other thing I want to mention is whatever rotary cutter you use, this size rotary cutter, a 45 millimeter, they suggest that that's for cutting about 4 layers of fabric. Now, I just push harder and I can do more. But if you want ease in cutting a lot of fabrics, say like a stack of 10, then you want to use a 60 millimeter rotary cutter. It makes it cut like almost the same, if you're doing 10 with one of these, it is almost the same as doing 4 with a smaller one. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'll do the cut. So first of all, you're going to take, when you do this cut, you can cut it however you like. You can cut it, you could cut it curvy. We didn't. I mean, these are shortcuts. I would just do straight cuts. You can free cut it. You don't have to use a ruler. But if you're not going to do them all at once, I wouldn't.
Right.
I probably wouldn't do that because it's harder to redo. So you're just going to put your ruler somewhere on here, and you're going to make 2 cuts on each block. And they can both, like, here, let me throw this down. When you're doing the cuts, they could be, you know, both of them angled this way. They could be angled together. A lot of times I kind of angle them like opposite, just so I get a different shape in the middle. But if you angle them both this way, I guess you'd get, you know, a different shape too.
You know, totally different than what we have.
And after you, I'm going to make the cut in just a second. But after we cut them and we sew them back together into our now a little bit smaller rectangles, you're going to be able to mix them up, those rectangles, how you want. They don't have to stay one cut on one side, one cut on the other, anything like that. Because you theoretically could, you know, do, it'd be hard to do less than 3 of the same cut because you wouldn't have much to mix up.
Right.
If you only did 2 of each cut, you can only mix up 2 fabrics, which you could do. It's totally up to you.
You're right.
Okay, so here's one method where I'm just going to take and I'm going to make a cut there, and I'm going to do this one different. I'm going to do them both with the same cut, but maybe a slightly
different
angle, a little more big angle. Okay. And then if I wanted to repeat that cut on my other ones, I would just take one of these pieces, and you actually don't need all 3 pieces, you only need 2 of them, and I'd stick it on top of my next stack, and I would use this now as a guide to make the next cut. Okay, I should have used the bigger one, bigger ruler, bigger rotary cutter. And so then to finish it, I'll just take this piece or this piece, either one, stick it on top, and then I can make the next cut.
That's how I did mine.
Okay, so then, well, let me just finish this cut. And I will use the bigger rotary cutter, and you'll see that it goes a little, you know, these pieces of fabric that we've asked you to cut like normal, we've made them slightly oversized for 2 reasons. One, because we know some of you are not as comfortable with the 1/4" seam. See, that just went through very easy. And some of you, so that's why they're a little wider than they need to be, because it was a weird measurement to make it exact.
Right.
Okay. But when you're sewing these back to, now you're going to keep, now I want you to keep, after you got them all cut, keep them all, you know, this is your left piece, this is your middle piece, this is your right piece. You want to keep that up. Keep that the same.
As long as they're the ones that are cut exactly
they're cut the same. Right. And then this is, I'm saying, only mix it up in the ones that you've cut exactly the same. And you're going to take, and you're going to just arrange, like what I did was I took a board, like a cutting mat, and so I could carry it around. And I arranged different pieces, and so that I could make sure I had them all mixed up in a way that I liked. And you'll notice on mine, I don't have, well, there's 9 pieces, so you could do 3 coordinating fabrics, 3 white, 3 black. I did not do that because, I guess I need one more of those. Because to get that number of pieces, I had, we're getting near the end of the year, and I don't have as much black fabric left, black. So I made 1 3-inch strip, and I was able to get 5 pieces of black out of that. But I have more white, so I cut more white, and then the rest I did with my coordinating fabric. So then I just see how I like it. You know, I'm going to mix them up more than this, but this is roughly what you're going to do. And then, so now these will be my new pieces.
And she said 5 because she'd made 2 blocks.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was when I was cutting the fabric for 2 blocks. Right. So I really needed 2 strips of focus fabric and then 18 strips of the rest that I divided up between them. Okay, so the other, you know, I don't let Shelley get any words of wisdom in, but I'm sure she has some. But one thing,
these, or you got enough room?
No, I'm just going to hold it up and show them. When you are sewing these back together, if you don't make a straight cut, which you probably won't, remember you have to offset the pieces by a slight amount. It roughly comes out to where these 2 pieces meet at the exact point. That should be a 1/4 inch in. So if you stick it under your pressure foot and put it down the needle, and the needle hits right in that joint where the 2 cross, then that's the right offset. So then when you open them back out, then they will be staggered down and it will open flat. It's the same method you use if you're putting together binding pieces, anything like that, where you have an angle.
Triangles.
You want that inner, where the 2 cross.
The V,
sometimes the V or the crotch.
Yeah.
You know, they sometimes call that.
Right.
That should be right at whatever your seam allowance is. Right. If your seam allowance is 1 inch, then it would be at 1 inch, but ours is a 1/4 inch. Okay. And then after you sew them back together, I would just press to the dark fabric. Most likely, we're not going to have any seams that hit each other.
Right.
Was there anything else that you could think of on this
first step?
I can
think of for now, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to go away and Shelley's going to cut hers. We're going to mix them up, sew them back together. That's probably
this is the biggest, longest step.
The biggest segment, the most work of this block.
Right.
And we will be right back. All right. All right. So we have our blocks, our rectangles sewn back together. Now, Shelley and I were just discussing, if you weren't sure that you sewed them right, and you wanted to know like what size they should be, or you wanted to trim them if they were jaggy, you could lose, probably 1/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
In height. On the 3, they start at 3 inches. They need to be somewhere between 2 3/4 and 2 7/8 wide. But you don't have to trim anything. The only thing you may want to trim for the next step are the little tiny flag things that stick up if they bother you. I just sew over them. I don't worry about it.
Or if if you have one because I haven't trimmed mine.
Well, it's got the little flags.
Well, I'm more
while you're looking, Shelley. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, this, how I mentioned about offsetting that edge. Keep in mind, if your angle was very slight, I wouldn't offset it. I would just leave it, because if you offset it, like this one, you can see I offset it a little too much, and it came down. It hangs down, but I'm not worried about it because we have extra on the height. Width-wise, these need to be, if you're going to do an accurate 1/4 inch seam on the center, they need to be 6.5 inches wide. But they're probably closer to 7, would be my guess. Mine are all about 7.
Oh, yeah,
right
I didn't
now.
even measure them, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you sew a 1/4 inch seam.
Right.
We had 8, so they should be roughly about 7 inches wide.
But I was going to say, because if you sewed them together and you didn't get them exactly right, this is where you might want to trim, because you have to sew this edge. You want a straight edge. Those are the edges you might.
Well, you have to point to the seam. You didn't
Right
sew
here.
that edge. Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah,
the little flag things.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
it's more than a flag, but yeah.
Right, but if you have all right, here's the beauty of this block. If you have 8 pieces that look great and one that's a little off, don't worry about it. Don't resew it, because total across all of them we have extra. And at the end, it's hard to see, but these are not, this one was actually cut, as we call it, wonky, where I turned the ruler as much as I can. You have room to do that. Mm-hmm. You can see it kind of here. This one is like a weird shape, this piece.
Yeah, I had a lot of extra.
Yeah, so that's why I'd almost recommend you don't try to trim these up unless they're too off. And if you have a couple that you have to trim to make them look right, put them in a different horizontal.
Each one in a
separate side. Put one on one side and one on the other. Okay, so now then get on to the next step as we just talk about these. Okay, so now you're going to take these pieces, your 10 pieces, and you're going to arrange them into 2 stacked rows of 5. And that order is up to you, and you can leave them all in the way they were when they cut them. On this block, you can see that I actually, I like things symmetrical. I just do. So I reversed each one. So they kind of go, that centerpiece goes wide and narrow, every other one. And then I actually, then looked at the color balance, how I did that too.
I looked at the color more than anything and said, okay, this one will go and this one will go.
Yeah. So that's totally up to you how you arrange these. So should we just sew the 2, come back with 2 roughly half blocks?
Sure.
Okay. So you're going to arrange them into 2 rows of 5, and then sew the seams in between, and don't do the center seam yet. If you want, you could even wait to press them, because you will want to watch your pressing on this last pressing. So you could wait. And I mean, everyone has a different method for how they do things, but I arranged mine into 2 different rows, and I sewed like the bottom 2 together, and I put a little I was trying to show you this. I put a little clip on the bottom of each one, and then I alternate and I go to the next one, and then I cut off, so I don't have to keep cutting my thread, and then I cut off one and I go back, and I know where the bottom is, so that's why I put the clip on the bottom.
Yeah,
so then I sew the next one on the top, not on the edge where the clip is. So that's just a little strategy to keep them in order. You do have to remember which row you took it out of. I can't help you there. But.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever strategy works for you.
Yeah. So use some sort of strategy to kind of keep them in order. I kind of did the same thing in sewing these together. I put one at the bottom because Shelley presses at the end. I press after I sew 2 together, and then I come back and press the last one. So, okay, all right. So we will come back with our 2 roughly half block pieces. Okay. Okay. So we have our 2 half block pieces done, and first things on the pressing. So these are going to have intersecting seams most likely. If they don't match exactly, I wouldn't worry that much. Don't stress over it. Yeah. But they should roughly be that same height, so you should intersect. So what I do is I take 1/2 and I press it to the darker of that part. So like, say this one that's mostly white, I probably press away from that one. And then I take the other piece after I decide which side, so it can either go on this side, it could go on this side, I can turn it around, which way I like looking best. Put it there, and then I compare the seams and I press them opposite. Okay, so then you're going to end up with what we always call these nesting seams that will kind of lock together. So one goes one goes the other way, and then when you're sewing, they kind of push into each other and hold in place. The other thing that I would recommend, and this after you press it, get it nice and flat, make it very flat. Mm-hmm. Then the 2 edges you're going to sew together, you might want to make sure that they look pretty even.
Right, yeah, I still got to trim mine.
Yeah, I haven't trimmed mine. One thing to talk about, what you're going to say, Adriane, why didn't you say this before I sewed them? Or, if you're a long-time sewer, you already know this. But I know a lot of you are new sewers. So my sewing machine, I have, and Shelley does too, we have a built-in walking foot on our machine. And so the walking foot helps your fabric feed evenly through. So if you have two of the same size pieces, they come up kind of sewed the same.
Right.
If you don't have a walking foot, your bottom piece is going to move faster than your top foot. That's just what happens because the feed dogs on the machine pull it through faster. So what I do right now, actually, because I was sewing something and I was sewing masks, and the walking foot gets in the way. I have my regular foot on there, and it's a kind of, mine doesn't snap on and off. I think Shelly's comes off very easy, but I have to use a screwdriver. Anyway, so if I have a piece that's longer, a little bit longer than the other one, I put that one on the bottom. And sometimes I'm flipping things back and forth. And when I'm sewing together, like I was finishing a quilt for my granddaughters, and there were a lot of seams that weren't, it was a weird quilt and some weird matching seams. So I constantly change the direction to use that to my advantage.
You're right.
And ease in that extra length.
Right.
So sometimes I will take off my walking foot if I need to ease something in because it just makes the final product look so much better.
Yeah.
So definitely use that to your advantage to ease it in. And so if you have one that's a little bit off, put that piece, the bigger one, on the bottom, and it'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do right now is we're going to sew that center seam, and then after you're done with that, press it very flat, and we will be back and we will look at our blocks to decide how we're going to trim them. Okay? Do you have anything, Shelley, that come up in yours?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. I laid mine out very carefully, and I don't know. Then I sewed them. I'm like, holy cow, Adriane, you have a lot of these where the same fabric are right next to each other. So I overthought it.
But we do have I thought I did not have my two whites next to each other, but they are.
Yeah. But I have a lot where they're stacked, but it's fine.
Yeah.
It's a big jumble of blocks, and it's all going to look good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be back in a minute. Okay. Here's our final blocks, almost final.
Right.
We haven't trimmed them, so I wanted to show you on mine. You can see that I've got, and when I trimmed my center seam before I sewed it, I want to say I just laid it along the edge and I just took off the high point. It was like, it's a very small sliver that you should be trimming off. But if you had to trim more, it wouldn't hurt because you'll see, and I've got easily a 1/4 inch extra from my square up on all sides. And and so we're saying when you go to cut this, to trim this down to your final block, you can turn the ruler however you make sure it fits on there. And how's yours, Shelley?
Mine, I was checking it and it seems a lot. And I actually had one of the final seams, one side, I had to cut off a fair amount because I was trying to make everything be straight. I used the lines on here to say I only had 2 of the blocks that kind of lined up right. So. But I still have a lot left.
Okay.
Still have a lot.
Yeah. So you should have plenty in order to trim it. Now, if you're turning these in for the drawing for the guild, you can trim them or you could leave it untrimmed. Sometimes the people like to have them a little oversized so they have, when they're putting together their quilt from those blocks, they have those to work, the extra size to work with. I want to trim it because I want to say this is how I want it to look. I don't want them to, if I want it to look kind of skewed and wonky, then I want it that way, and I don't want them to straighten it back out. So, okay, so like I said, this October block is due in November, as far as we know right now.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully we will see you at the November meeting.
Right.
And
only 2 more to go.
Yep, 2 more. Both of these final 2 blocks use very small pieces of your focus fabric. So if you have some long thin pieces or even some other I don't know, Shelley's block. Mine is going to use thin pieces.
Even 1-inch squares. Save everything until the end.
Of your focus fabric for sure. I've actually made we have a dilemma with my final block because my final block I can make, we're leaning toward doing the 1 block, right? Yeah. Or to miniaturize it into 4 little ones you put together.
Yeah.
And so Shelley's thinking people, aren't going to want to maybe sew all 4 blocks.
It's a dilemma.
They both look
for a
really
couple
good.
different reasons.
Yeah,
so
they both look really good.
they
So
We'll
it's the
see.
same block, either a big version or a miniaturized
maybe
one.
we'll bring our sister in for a third opinion.
Yeah. So, anyway, so we will see you next month, and good luck.